Hey, everybody. It is so good to be back together after Easter. I know that Easter's such a great time, right? We have our building more full with people than we do any other Sunday of the year. And then for me, I come back the next Sunday, and like you, I think I preached so good. Where did all the people go? And I think what happens then is that it kind of settles in what your real job is. And that is not to get people just excited about the fact Jesus rose from the dead, right? But getting them excited about the kind of life he can raise up for them, the kind of family he can raise up, the kind of church family that we can become if we let him raise us up. And today we're going to talk about a topic I'm excited about. It's really intentional, and it's talking about how to manage conflict in your teams. And let me tell you why I chose that. Like you, we don't work harder at any time of the year than we work hard at Easter. And our operations team works hard. Our family ministries teams work hard. Of course, our creative teams work hard. And when that happens, there's a lot of tension. And so I'd even joke with my wife sometime. I'd say, I think we saw more people come to Christ, and we're going to have more members next week. Hope we didn't lose a few with all the tension going on. And so we're going to talk about how to resolve some of that tension and some of that conflict today. And I'm happy to have our operations pastor with me, Pastor Matt Mashburn. He spent decades now keeping policy and people moving forward together. So Matt, thank you for making time to be with us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I always enjoy the opportunity for others to learn from my mistakes. It makes them feel like they're not as bad, if other people
Yeah.
get to learn from them. So I'm excited to get to do this. This is fun.
Well, you've served in the role you're serving with us for a long time and with some other churches. And of course, I've also had people that have been in your role over the years. And so one of the things that really I took notice of when you first started working for us is a lot of operations pastors are very good at keeping policy together. And that's obviously what they're hired to do, right? Keep the whole ship running. But your parents both have counseling backgrounds. Is that right? Both of
Yep.
them, right?
Yep. My parents and my brother's a psychologist. So
Yeah. And being a pastor, one of the things that, I was grateful for is I saw how you were dealing with the people because it's not always easy to be in the role that you're in. But tell the people a little bit about your background before we get started.
yeah, so I was in the business world for about 13 years. I ran a pretty good sized organization with anywhere from 300 to 400 employees at a time. So I kind of cut my teeth on operations and people management there, and then got the call to ministry in 2003 and have served at four different churches, Faith Family being my fourth and final one. That's what I'm shooting for. So it's been fun to be in ministry after having that business experience because I've been able to apply a lot of it.
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting into this today because every pastor watching knows that it's not easy to attract high quality volunteers. It's not easy to keep high quality volunteers. It's not easy to attract quality staff. It's not easy to keep quality staff. And so we want to help everybody with that today. And we'll do another webinar maybe on how to attract and keep quality volunteers and staff. That'd be a good webinar title. But today we're going to assume there's some conflict that maybe you're managing, and we're going to talk about things you can do, really good things to do to help with that. Before we do, real quickly, we're so grateful for our partners at Significant Church. None of us who are pastors get paid for what we do. Our pay is to see pastors filled with joy, to see churches succeeding, because as we're sowing into each other instead of living isolated, God's helping all of our churches be stronger. But it doesn't mean that nobody gets paid. There's a lot of work that has to be done. And so there's about a $250,000 budget. And we appreciate every single one of our churches that help sponsor Significant Church, and also our corporate sponsors, one of which is Clergy Advantage. And we love the people at Clergy Advantage. Basically, they recognize that pastors are worth every penny they make, and they want to help you maximize your money. And there's a lot of ways you can do that with the housing allowance, with tax advantages, with different things, retirement benefits, some of them very favorable to the clergy. And honestly, laws are changing all the time. So we want to make sure that we have really good people who are helping us in this process. And so if you are questioning any of that, if you feel like maybe that could be better, we'd encourage you to give the people at Clergy Advantage a call. Their website is clergysupport.com. And Matt, you've known these guys a while. Really good people, huh?
Yeah, I have. And I know that this is one of the challenge for pastors and to get financial advice outside of the church world, because most financial advisors don't understand pastoral compensation. So I love the fact that these guys specialize in it and just can really give you some advice that's specific to your employment situation.
Yeah, and sadly, we've even hired pastors who will go to an accountant in our church or in our city, and they're just not dealing with the same laws every day. So it really is helpful. Well, hey, I've really looked forward to getting into this, and just as a starting point, Matt, just go ahead and get us started on this process of leading teams through conflict.
Yeah. So the thing is, nobody likes conflict management. I've often had people mistake the fact that I will do conflict and will not shy from it is the fact that I like conflict. That's really not true. The truth is, I dislike what happens with unaddressed conflict more than I dislike handling conflict. Nobody really enjoys it. But if you can resolve conflict within your staff, it just eliminates so many challenges that you don't need on top of all the other challenges you have. So, and it's not always bad. Sometimes conflict helps us find better ways to do things. But I just have always found a part of my job is to limit the damage, provide solutions, and help resolve some of the conflict.
Okay, so let me give you a good example, okay? One that I'm sure you've faced before. We just finished Easter and more people got saved than got saved in a long time. But my facilities person is convinced that my creative person doesn't appreciate what they do because they did something that caused the facilities volunteer or staff, whatever, to have to work a lot harder and harder than they should have if that person had been more considerate and blah, blah, blah. So tell me, what's the starting point? How do we work through these conflicts?
So basically what I do is what I've found in my career is almost all conflict is the result of some type of misunderstanding. And I kind of grouped it into four categories. One would be really the biggest one, misinterpretation of what someone does or says. Often we interpret it based on where we are, not where they are. Two would be incorrect third-party information. Somebody tells us somebody did something or said something. Three would be context confusion. When, how, where, who, why something happened. And then number four would be a lack of underlying knowledge about a topic. So it might be that I misunderstand the details and it creates conflict. But, I always go back to Matthew 18. That's the easiest one to go to. I'm not going to sit here and preach Matthew 18 to you guys. You know all that. But I kind of wanted to take a chance and break it down because I think Matthew 18 appears to be simple to apply, but it's not always that simple. So I'm going to give you three scenarios, and if it's okay, I'll kick off with the first scenario. So scenario one is what's contained in verse 15. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained a brother. And here's the deal. Sometimes that's all staff conflict is. It's between you and somebody else. We're often in that situation, especially if you're in an executive role and you have to deal with things, make decisions. And here's the number one rule I would say. Seek to understand before being understood. If you do that, you've disarmed the situation right away. And I believe a part of that is well-worded questions, because well-worded questions can disarm the emotion and bring the conversation to a place where each party is seeing truth instead of feelings. Because here's the deal. Emotion seldom leads to reconciliation. Emotion tends to be raw, not reconciliatory. So you have to also be cognizant of your timing. When you feel like doing this confrontation doesn't mean it's the right time. Often the timing is the key to the resolution. So I would say the first thing is well-worded questions, thoughtful questions. And I'll give you 5 things to think about. One, well-worded questions are not accusatory. You don't ask somebody a question in order to accuse them of something. 2 would be well-worded questions are to gather facts, not make a case. I don't know if you ever been in a group with a guy who prays to teach, who prays things that he wants you to do. Kind of the same thing with well-worded questions. You're not trying to make a case, you're trying to gather facts. 3, well-worded questions are not confrontational. That can be tricky. Number four, this is so important, and this will be a key to disarming things. They must be accompanied by listening well. If we don't listen well, what's the point of the question? And here's a secret key to that. Take notes. Anytime somebody's taking notes about what you're saying, you feel like they're paying more attention. So let's say you're preaching. If you look out there and there's people taking notes, you're like, I'm going to preach to that person because they're taking notes. They're really paying attention. So I found taking notes helps people feel like they're being heard. And then here's your bonus, number 5. Don't try to answer your own question. That's a diatribe, not a question. When you start trying to answer your own question, you're just giving a lecture. So in that, there's 2 things I want to caution you about. Number 1, this was a rule we had at my third church, is say the last 10%. So here's what happens with a lot of people. You deal with a conflict, you get into the conversation, it's going really well, and you're like, you know what, it's going well. I'm not going to hit that last thing. I'm just going to let this thing, end on a good note. Well, here's the problem. If you don't hit the last thing, you will be hitting the last thing at some point. So you got to say that last 10% that maybe you feel like it's going to push the conversation a little bit, but then you've completely handled the situation and done the job, and you've not left something on the table that you're going to have to deal with later. The second thing, this is a big one for me, is keep short lists. So when I first came to Faith Family, I talked about this, and one of the pastors misunderstood me, and he would come to meetings and to describe how I had told him to not have a lot of things on his to-do list. And finally, I'm like, wait, time out. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Was if you have conflict with somebody, address it right away. And what I would say is, if you save up things, like if you come in with 10 things, you only get to have the last 1 or 2. Because if you don't keep short lists, that's not on the person that you're frustrated with, it's on you. So I really challenge people, hey, if you got something going on, go ahead and have that conversation, because it's only going to lead to more and more hurt. But let me just say one thing to caution you about conflict. Avoiding conflict is never good unless you're going to end the relationship anyway. Because if the conflict is only going to result in hurt and the relationship's already lost, that's retribution, not an attempt at reconciliation. Conflict is not so you can be right. Conflict is so you can find common ground and find reconciliation. Last thing, require your staff to take this step on their own before they bring it to you. It's easy to become the mediator, and it's easy to say, you know what, just bring both people in here and we'll sort it out. Teach them to do this part on their own. Require them to say, you know what, I'm going to go out and do it. And sometimes I have to push them kind of hard, but I'm not going to get involved till you make an effort. The only time that's not really appropriate is if there's an imbalance in the 2 people that are trying to resolve the conflict. So that's part 1.
That was really, really good. And I just want to say to all the guys who are watching, if you're like me, you want to take notes, because this is like a checklist, right? It's not like a motivational talk. It's like, okay, did I do every single one of these? Do I really understand what the result of conflict is? Because I'm sure that you're listening like me and you're thinking, I have taken third-party interpretation and I've taken that as fact from time to time. So I just want to encourage everybody that you can go to our Significant Church Network YouTube channel. And if you want to slow it down, hit the button, write everything down so that your checklists are really, really strong. You can do that. And I loved the well-worded questions and say the last 10% and then the short list. So what you're saying with a short list is, this is something that I really want to work through, because what you're saying is that we shouldn't let things build up. And that if we have close relationships, those close relationships should be constantly working through issues as they arise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say that's a great way to say it. I mean, it won't always be one thing, but it shouldn't be 10 things.
Yeah, so you may have, I'm just going to tell you somebody I thought about when you were talking. I thought about somebody I know who came to me for counsel, and in the family he married into, they had about a 65-70% divorce rate. And so his wife's a good gal and they're super compatible, but she's going to bring that into the marriage, right? And then it starts affecting his life. It affects his kids. It affects his church. And he's starting to wring his hands because he didn't think about that. And I thought somebody gave him good advice, a counselor he went to see, who told him within his marriage to just have like a certain time every week that was allowed so that it didn't spill into all the other parts of their relationship. And then you may start with a pretty long list in that kind of a scenario, right? Because when we were all young and married, we didn't realize how long the list was when we got married. But then you have a system, and excuse me, I had a little upper respiratory infection. I'm catching a healing right now. But you have a system that the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and the love gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And in essence, that's what we're after in this reconciliation process, is we're looking for people who care enough about us to work through issues, because we all have them. And as we work through that list, uh, would it be right to say that uh, it's short because I'm not letting things build up, and it's short because I'm going to learn to enjoy imperfect people too? Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it goes back to some of the other things like picking the right time. I'm not telling people as soon as something frustrates you, run down the hall and have a conversation. And I think that's good advice for your friends that were married, is let's not do this all the time. Let's pick a time each week that we're going to, then we're both prepared to be open and have those conversations. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to this second scenario, because I looked over your notes and I was guilty of both things at one time or another. I remember as a young pastor, I told one staff person, I want you to go home and watch the Andy Griffith show. And when you can treat all the people like Andy treated Barney, you're going to be just fine around here. And
That's
that wasn't bad advice for the time, but I realized Jesus' advice was a whole lot better. So let's go into scenario number two.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've developed this over, like I said earlier, a lifetime of doing it wrong. But scenario two is when you're the intermediary, which for a lot of us, that's where we end up. And verse 16 says, "But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses." So again, this only happens when scenario one has played out. So you're holding people accountable to do that. The only thing, like I said earlier, the only caveat to that would be if one-on-one confrontation would be emotionally damaging to one staff member, based on the topic or their situation, or if it's so unequal that resolution is not likely. So those are the scenarios that I do sometimes make exceptions for. But as the intermediary, you're responsible for managing both sides of the conflict. Do not pick a side. If you feel like you need to pick a side, get somebody else to be the intermediary, because you want to be the neutral party. Even if you think one side is right, it's important that both sides feel cared for, and that we will end up with not a winner and a loser, but a winner and a winner. That's your goal. Your goal is
Can I ask
for
you a question there, Matt? Because I might
Sure.
have read that verse wrong, but when he says take two or three along, so you're saying bring in two or three intermediaries, like bring in people who love both sides and are going to help you see both sides. Don't ask each people to bring kind of people that under. So are you saying that those people should be neutral that you bring in every time?
I think it depends on the situation, but I think you have to be neutral. And if you're not, find somebody who is. And sometimes that's
You're
difficult.
talking about me as being the person who's going to resolve conflict with somebody. I'm staying neutral,
Yes,
even though we're bringing in other people, so that when they speak, I'm seeing it from both sides. That's okay. That helps.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you want a winner and a winner, because you want both sides to walk out and say, you know what, I feel like I was able to say what I said and I agree with what the outcome was. But here's the other thing. Conflict is a teaching opportunity, not a firefighting opportunity. So you're going into this, and the purpose is to teach both parties how to deal with conflict well. It's not to put out the fire and move on. That's hard, because in ministry, you got to keep things rolling. But if you see it as a fire, you'll extinguish one or both parties, and the result will be hurt, not health. So but don't miss the opportunity to train your staff. One of those people sitting in the room may be the intermediary the next time, and training them how to do that is so valuable to you because you don't have to keep being that person all the time. So first thing I would say is don't try to express lane conflict. And what I mean by that is follow the formula. Don't try to make it go fast. Don't try to speed it up. If you feel like you're in that place, save it for another time. So I would say don't go into the mediation uninformed. Don't just walk in and say, okay, tell me your side, and let's figure this out. I would meet with each party first, ask questions, and use our guidelines from before. Well-worded questions are not accusatory. They're to gather facts, not make a case. They're not confrontational. They're accompanied by listening well, and answering your own question is unproductive. Sometimes in this conversation, the person will realize that their part in the conflict is the part that needs to be addressed, and you'll come to a reconciliation almost in the individual conversation, because when people say things out loud, it sounds differently than they say them in their head. So the second thing I always do is I ask each party individually, what does reconciliation look like for them? Because if you don't know what a win looks like for them, there's no way for you to go in and create a win for both sides. If either party has no interest in reconciliation, you got to do more work individually before you bring them together. You've got to get them to a place. Now, if they just absolutely won't reconcile, that's a different conversation. That's a staffing conversation because we have to have, unity. Once you determine what the win looks like, you start preparing both parties for the conversation. And this is the way I would coach them. I would coach them about the right language to use. First of all, talk about the issue, not the person. Everybody's heard this in marital counseling. It's the same thing. Don't come in and talk about the person, talk about the issue. What happened, what was said, what is the thing that's caused the issue, the conflict. Part number 2 is stay focused on the current issue. Remember, you can't come with a long list. So I always coach them. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about what we agreed to talk about today. Number 3, be kind. I know that sounds obvious, but it's always a good reminder to be kind. You got to remind people this is not a negotiation, it's a reconciliation. A negotiation is a different thing. We could talk about it another time. And then I always say the most important language to use is probably no language. And that means listen. You've got to listen to what's being said because you're seeking to understand, not to be understood. So then I ask each party to put their thoughts in writing after our conversation. What did you get from this? Because I want to make sure that I've been clear to them. So once I've defined the issue with each party, coach them how to handle discussion, I decide, when a good time would be for the meeting. So as I'm setting up the meeting, a couple of quick things. It needs to be a neutral location. Don't meet in one of the other's offices. It just starts off with an imbalance. So find a neutral location, go to a coffee shop, find a gathering area at the church that you can have some privacy, but make sure that it's a location that doesn't put either party at a disadvantage. I always start with ground rules. I cover these at the beginning of the conversation. One is each party has ample time to share. Neither party should interrupt the other. Then it's my job to manage this. If somebody does interrupt somebody, it's my job to say, hold on a minute. Let's give each other time to speak. Here's a big one. Either party can call for a break at any time. So if somebody calls timeout, it's break time. There's no debate about it. That means we need to take a little break. The other rule is I have the right to end the conversation. If I say we're not going somewhere where we need to go, then I have the right to go, we're going to end the conversation now, and we're going to come back another time. They both have to agree to that. Then I usually give them an initial amount of time to share. So I'll usually say about 5 minutes, because to the person speaking, 5 minutes feels like 2. To the person listening, 5 minutes feels like 10. So I find that to be a pretty good even thing, even kind of in the middle. And what
Are you saying to the
do,
preacher a 30-minute message feels like 10 minutes, and to the people, it feels like an hour? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And usually I decide who's going to speak first. I usually try to do something funny to break the ice. I'll have rock, paper, scissors, or I'll say pick a number or thumb wrestling, which can go bad sometimes. But I try to do something kind of funny to break the ice, and kind of like the old small group icebreaker. Then I present to each person what a win looks like for each party, and hopefully that's where we're headed. Summarize each party's position, verify with them that I'm saying it correctly, and then, of course, we decide who's going to speak first. Then, as the speaking begins, I just monitor the interaction and call out the guidelines when they're broken. And here's some guidelines that you need to keep in mind that may break the reconciliation down. When one party uses emotion for leverage, that is never good. If emotions get high, stop and address the emotions and de-escalate. If you can't do that, stop the meeting. If emotions can't be de-escalated, you got to stop. Number two, if one person attacks the other instead of discussing the issue, you got to stop there. You got to call that out. Number three, if one person begins to repeat themselves over and over, nobody needs that. Ask them if they have anything new to add, or, I think if you remind people sometime, my wife has accused me of not only hammering the nail into the wood, but hammering it through the wood. So sometimes usually it's a hand on my leg when we're having a conversation when I've said it too many times. And then the last thing is someone that starts bringing up things that are not part of the current issue. Typically, when somebody feels like they're starting to lose the reconciliation, they start bringing up other stuff. That was not part of the rules. And it's easy to say, hey, wait a minute. We're talking about the thing that we agreed to talk about. We're not going to bring up the other stuff. So once each party shared, you just begin to ask questions back and forth, and you let them ask questions of each other. Let's make sure we understand each other. What do you not understand about his, what he said? What do you not understand about what she said? Ask them if at that point they think their idea of a win has changed, because that'll happen sometimes. You'll go in and somebody will say, my idea of a win is that they apologize and that they go to all the people that got that email and tell them that they didn't mean to say that. And then sometimes when they hear the person and hear their heart, they're like, yeah, I don't really need all that, So kind of check and see if that definition of a win has changed. Ask each person to see if there's a way, if they feel like there's a way to achieve the win for the person opposite them, and then keep asking questions and moderating. Just moderate. Don't preach. Don't solve. Just keep asking questions to draw them closer to a solution. Then, if you don't reach an agreement, you just agree to pause and pick a time when you can meet again, because again, you have to come to agreement at some point. You can't have disunity. But it's okay to say, guys, we're going to take a time out. This is not going where we need it to go. Let's just take some time apart, spend some time praying about this, and let's think about our different positions. So sorry, that was a lot.
No, that was very helpful, very thorough, but very helpful. And I'll tell you what I was thinking about as you were talking is there's a book that's been helpful to me, and I've also suggested to other people. It's called the Peacemaker, a biblical guide to making peace, and it's written by a former attorney, Ken Sandy. And here's what I think happens to a lot of us in pastoral ministry. So I'm going to take just a minute and talk to guys. Is we kind of start where I did with Andy Griffith and Barney Fife thing, because we're all pretty political, right? We're holding things together. We're making peace in our churches all the time. And so sometimes we don't recognize it, but that was probably decent advice for scenario one, that you want people to learn to not make such big issues out of everything. We have people around us who are really good at figuring out how to get their way. And it doesn't even mean their heart's bad. It might have just been how they learned to survive as a kid, these little techniques they have to get their own way. And so we try to, we get to scenario one and we try to make them into people who want peace with people more, which honestly, some people don't. When you say, can we have a talk about this? If you're in the same world I'm in, some people, the answer is no. And what that means to me is they're probably not going to be my closest friend. We're never going to get that close if you can't talk through things. But you got to be prepared that for some people, when you go to scenario one, they're going to say no. And I think scenario two, when I was looking over the notes, is what helped me the most, because it is so easy either to just say, okay, I'm going to avoid conflict then. if that's the way this person is, I'm going to just avoid the conflict. Or I'm going to express lane, solve it. But to really say to somebody, you don't want to talk about this, but I'm going to go to our executive pastor. I'm going to go to our pastor. I'm going to go to whatever, because we're on the same team and I want us to get along well. So we're going to work on this. So much is gained in your people's lives, in your staff's life, in your volunteers' life. So much is gained if we teach them how to make peace better and to build a relationship better. So I just want to encourage everybody to think through this, because I know for me, it really took helping some people through personal family crises that made me read the Peacemaker book. And then I started realizing we need to do this better on our church staff. We need to do this better in other places. So I think probably some of you may have had similar feelings as we were talking. And again, I want to remind you, that's why we put these up on the archive, because I recognize he just downloaded what could turn into a book, at least a mini book, into all of us. So if you need to go back and take your notes, you're able to do that. And there's good documentation on the screens to help you do that. But Matt, tell us why it's worth it. Tell us a story of somebody that it really turned out good.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question when you told me you're going to ask it, and there's been so many examples, but there's a category for us today, and I'll give you an example of it that really causes a lot of conflict, and that's text and email. And the issue is when somebody reads your text or email, they read it in the frame of mind they're in, not in the frame of mind you are in. So I see a lot of misunderstanding over text and email. But I'm going to give you an example of one that wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a misstep. So at my first church, we had a lot of campuses. We planted churches, and one of our church planters sent me an email asking a question. And I didn't really know the answer. So I forwarded it to the staff member that would have that answer, which happened to be one of the other executive pastors, and copied the guy who sent the email. Well, the executive pastor was in a bad mood that day, and he sent back a really kind of a scathing comment about this church planter, but he hit reply all.
Yikes.
So I get it. And I'm like, oh no, what's happened here? So I go down to his office. I'm like, man, I know you don't realize it, but you hit reply all. And he's like, oh no. So, but here's the thing. I got them together. We talked about it, and they became even closer because it was just something that he said because he was having a bad day. And they became closer through dealing with the conflict than they really ever had, because it caused them to have conversations that actually created a little chemistry. So, that's the kind of stuff I love to see happen, because I do see that a lot. People actually will get closer through conflict because they actually their relationship becomes deeper. But that's one I always tell, because it's pretty funny. And let's be honest, a lot of us have hit reply all and we didn't mean to.
Well, I think and I think what's great about that is it shows the maturity of those two guys, that they could have chosen to hold a grudge and to make that person bad for a long time. But somehow, which honestly, I wish I could say that's the norm, but I don't think it is, the norm is that we find people we're close to, we want them to defend us against people we're not close to, and that unhealthy thing can go on and on. And sometimes, I mean, the Bible talks about how you people who defend you at the city gates, right? You do need people to defend you. But man, if you can just get people to talk to you, if we can get employees, if we can get families, if we can get people to say, hey, this can turn out good. We can actually get a whole lot closer if we get good at this. What a blessing that can be. What a disruptor to generational iniquities that have caused family lines to be negatively affected. So, I mean, I could pause right here and just pray for people for a while, because the power of this is so good. So scenario 1 taught us how to go privately. Scenario 2 taught us how to go with others who are going to help us resolve our conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're to scenario 3.
So scenario 3 is verse 17. This one's quite a bit shorter. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. So just a couple of quick things on this. First of all, you have to define church. A lot of people read this and think you have to go up in front of the church on a Sunday and work out your conflict. I don't think that's what was meant here. what was meant here is whatever the leadership body is of the church. So it might be elders, might be staff, might be deacons, board members, but make sure they go to the right group of people. And it needs to be done in that setting. It's also not run around the church and tell everybody what's wrong, which that happens sometimes too. And here's the responsibility of the church. Unreconciled conflict cannot be ignored. That's a short path to disunity. Part of the responsibility of leadership is to make a decision when the parties can't agree. That can be difficult, but that's just part of what we signed up for. And here's another part of that. This is on my elder board at my previous church. This was a line that we used, and I love it. We have to act quickly and clearly. We used to say we deliberate as many, we speak as one. So discussion happens behind closed doors. Determination should be shared behind one podium, is how I like to say it. So we could disagree in the room, but when we left the room, we were saying one thing and we were saying it unified. The next to last thing is the governing body must provide clear consequences if the determination is not followed. It can't just be, here's what we think. It's got to be, here's what we think. If it's not followed, then these are the consequences, which might be removal from leadership, restriction from certain ministries, some type of restoration plan, or in some cases could be removal from the church. And I've been involved in those before, and those are difficult. But sometimes in order to maintain your unity, conflict has to be resolved by somebody being removed that can't deal with the conflict. And then the last thing I would say is once you've made the decision, you got to stick to it. You can't waffle. You got to stick to it. You got to follow through. You got to make sure everybody understands what it is and that you're going to stand behind it and your whole team's going to stand behind it. One thing I always say is I try to provide clear boundaries or expectations, and it's up to the person to determine the outcome. I don't decide if people are going to have a job or not have a job or go to the church or not go to the church. I say, this is what is required. You get to decide if you're going to stay or go. I think it's the same thing with conflict. Hey, this is what we expect. If you don't do that, then the result is this. And then you got to stick to it. Because if you don't, your credibility really suffers. But I will say, if you skip number 4 or 5, which is clear consequences and sticking to it, that may result in a significant hit to your leadership. And that doesn't really serve anybody. But here's my final word. And this one's going to hit kind of hard, but I believe conflict avoidance is conflict encouragement. If you avoid it, you're encouraging it, because anything you allow is something you're encouraging. So if that doesn't strike you, that's kind of the one thing that pops into my head whenever I don't want to deal with it or I'm tired. I'm like, okay, if I don't deal with this, then I'm saying it's okay. So.
Yeah, well, boy, that was really good, and I want to kind of say it from another perspective. I want to say it from the perspective of a guy who's pastored a church for 35 and a half years that has reached 4% of a county, and it started out really, really small. And I just want to say that it's been painful. I just want to be really honest and say it's been really, really painful. And people on the outside would say, we don't even know where the pain came from, or what are you talking about? Look at all the success you've had. No, it's been painful. But what he said at the end, when I said 100%, say that phrase again, conflict avoidance is
Conflict encouragement.
Conflict encouragement. There have been several times, and I'll try to say it with a scenario, but somebody would be upset because they thought that one staff person, how you treated them was different than how you treated them. And so you invite conversation. And the reality is they're doing 2 different jobs. And so the 2 different jobs have different expectations. And I like what, I'm a Pittsburgh boy, so Mike Tomlin coaches the Steelers, and he's a saying, he says, I'm not always equal, but I'm always fair. And I think that's a great statement, because he tries to be fair to everybody. But when people start playing that equal game, what they're trying to do is get you in a position where they can get from you what they want to make you feel guilty, so they get what they want from you. And so I can tell you there have been a lot of those scenarios where over the years somebody was trying to Rick Warren calls it putting their shingle on your building or their sign on your building. And so they're trying to take the platform that the Holy Spirit's built and they're trying to turn it into what they want it to be. And if you as a leader aren't strong, and I just say this, conflict avoidance usually means you're weak if you don't come and if you don't talk and if you don't set the culture and if people see you unfazed saying, hey, I'm not going to avoid this. Hey, I heard this is going on. Everybody come into my office. Come in right now because we're not conflict avoiders. But a lot of times conflict, the express lane is, we can get angry. And usually people put it in the express lane trying to handle it too quick. They try to handle it their way. And so I don't think there's anybody listening to me who is saying, I can think of a time I could repent over how I handled something. But I just want to underscore before we stop today that if you're going to set a culture that works, you're going to have to deal with this. You can't avoid it, and you also can't fast track it. And, I've had people who would try to work their agendas to get what they wanted. And then you'd find out, man alive, they had this whole other scenario set up that the moment they didn't get their way, they're going to walk out on you anyway. I've had people say things that you're like, you would really say that to make me look bad, to make yourself look better. And I pastor the best church in the world, guys, and I have all that going on. So I just want to encourage you that this seminar today is just a great culture setter for you. And what it's going to cause, I know I've watched Matt do this, is I've watched him pull people in, and if he let it go, they would never develop the personal skills that they develop. And so it really is a sign of love whenever he sits down and he says, okay, this department and this department, we're going to talk through this. And honestly, sometimes there are people who want to leave when you do that because they're so much more prone to conflict avoidance or to just being able to control people than they are this whole process. But for sure, when you get done with it, you've got a family on your staff instead of just a bunch of people up there working, and it's more of a job than it is a family on a mission for God. So anyway, I hope that helped. Matt, any final comments you want to say?
Well, I'll just say this. I have been doing this for 30 years, but coming to Faith Family has actually made me better at this because you've got a sense about how this church needs to run and deal with conflict. And you've softened my approach some, and I fought it a little bit at first, but I've really found a lot of value in it because it's shown me, I think you've taught me how to play the long game a little better. And I feel like that's another that's another tool in my tool bag, is to play the long game a little better. So there's a lot to be learned to hear about that. And I would say there's a lot to be learned about anything you think you're really good at. There's always something more to make it better. So I appreciate that and have enjoyed that here at Faith Family.
Well, thank you. That's a blessing. We're sure glad you're at Faith Family, and we like that part about you finishing here. So anyway, well, guys, thank you for being with us. And I know this was helpful. I mean, let's face it, if people don't get along, they're not going to go along for long, right? So we want to build a staff where people get along. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks. And I know this is a very busy time of year. We've got graduations, we have camps right around the corner, we have transitions seem to naturally occur, sometimes more weddings even this time of year. So I just want to encourage you that this is to keep you sharp, and don't just work hard without giving yourself time to be refreshed and also time to stay sharp. And I want to encourage you before the summer comes to plan your time. Don't get all bogged down in the ministry. Don't be working in it without working on it, because that's what gets us in trouble so much. And especially with your spouse, with your kids, with your grandkids, make sure you make some time, or you're going to make some memories this summer that are totally outside of ministry. Amen. Love you guys. Have an awesome weekend.